I'm Bryan Allen. I'm a colonel with the United States Air Force California Air National Guard. I'm the commander of the Aerospace Expeditionary Group for Wildland Firefighting this season, the 2017 season. My responsibilities are to make sure that we have the conduit between the U.S. Forest Service and CAL FIRE BLM and the Department of Defense to make sure that aerial firefighting occurs in a safe, effective, and efficient manner. I've been flying aerial firefighting since 1994. I fly the C-130J aircraft now. In years past, I've flown the C-130E, flying the MAFFS 1 system, and then have transitioned to the C-130J and the MAFFS 2 systems. Since 2003, I've been directly involved with national policy and procedures for the aerial firefighting program, interfacing with all of the national level organizations such as U.S. Forest Service, the Secretary of Defense's office, NORTHCOM, AFNORTH, and so on, trying to make sure that the processes and policies that we have in place make the program efficient and effective. The MAFFS program is a surge capability for aerial firefighting. Our goal is not to interfere with or tangle with the civilian air tanker fleet. It's to simply provide a safety net for the air tankers that we have out in the system already. We only have 8 aircraft that are capable of flying the system. There's 8 systems. We have more than 8 aircraft to be able to fly those systems. There are 4 airlift wings that perform this mission. The 4 airlift wings. An airlift wing is basically an installation that has a bunch of aircraft that would be normally used for warfighting. Normally 8 aircraft per wing, and they're strategically located throughout the United States. Our wing is the Channel Islands Air National Guard Base, and it's located near Point Mugu, California, Southern California. We have Reno, which has another 8 aircraft, and we have Reno, Nevada, and then we have Cheyenne, Wyoming, and Colorado Springs, Colorado. Those bases have these 8 aircraft, and each one can be called upon to either give one or both aircraft for a total of 8 systems flying around in support of the U.S. Forest Service, BLM, or CAL FIRE on a state fire. Back in 1971, there was a report that indicated there was 51 air tankers back in 1971. Yet we actually had fires on Air Force ranges, bombing ranges, and that gave us the impetus to put an aerial firefighting system of our own into an aircraft to fight our own fires on our Air Force property. Since then, the FMC Corporation actually was contracted to create this MAFFS, the legacy MAFFS system. So back in '71, we certified it, and we were actually fighting fires. The first fire we fought on was up near Santa Barbara with a MAFFS system. The U.S. Forest Service saw the value of that system beyond just the Air Force ranges, and actually asked if they could use the system, our aircraft and systems, on the fires in general. And that's how we got involved with the civil agencies fighting fires at that point. In 2003, there were a few aircraft incidents, a C-130A and a PBY-4 that that broke apart, actually, and crashed. And that caused a blue ribbon panel to look more deeply into the air tanker process. And we went from, I think, 33 air tankers down to 19 that year, I believe. We had the P3s and the P2Vs were the primary air tankers for the federal fleet. And at that point, MAFFS became critically important to making sure we could meet the need. So the 2004 season, 2005, and so on, until the Forest Service came out with their next-gen contract and became healthy again with their tankers, we played an even greater role. So over the years, over the last 45 or so years, MAFFS has been used almost every year in some role or another, either in a state role or a federal role fighting fires. There have been a few years we haven't flown at all. But it seems like a system that has a certain level of demand on it. So getting the MAFFS out to a fire is an interesting process. We want to make sure that the Forest Service and BLM and CAL FIRE actually use the civilian contractors first before they call us, because our folks are citizen airmen ready to deploy to a wartime fight. And we have been doing that quite often these days overseas in the Middle East. And so our primary focus has been to make sure that we're prepared to save American lives and property by prosecuting war overseas. So in concert with that, we've got to make sure we balance everything we do domestically The National Guard and Reserve have a unique responsibility for civil support. And so we have, when we're here at home and when our peacetime role, our primary role for these 4 wings is the aerial firefighting role. So we have to balance both needs, and we ask that the civil agencies call us when they need us. We're always going to be ready for them, but only call us when they really need us, and get us in and get us off of the fires as quickly as possible, commensurate with all the different resource needs that they have with at the U.S. Forest Service, CAL FIRE, BLM, and so on. So it's been an interesting ride. This year I was asked to be the commander of the AEG, and my responsibility is to have to answer the call for the Department of Defense and answer the call for the U.S. Forest Service, to make sure that we are meeting the needs for both the military and for the civil agencies. I have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that the Department of Defense operates as efficiently as possible. But I also have the responsibility of making sure that we have the resources necessary to actually fight the fight and bring the aircraft and crews in. So it's going to be an interesting year. I've actually been working through the AEG process before. This year I'm placed in command, and I'm honored to be in command of such fine aviators and such a fine long mission set with good traditions, and it's really enjoyable.
I understand that the only physical modification excuse me, that has to be done to a C-130 to enable it to carry a MAFFS is a fairly minor modification on the electrical panel. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the C-130 aircraft, almost all C-130 aircraft are capable of flying MAFFS itself. The MAFFS system itself is a piece of cargo, frankly. The C-130 aircraft is very well designed to bring a large cargo element back into the back cargo bay, but we have our system is pressurized, and we use air pressure to push the retardant outside the aircraft. Because we don't want to haven't wanted to cut any holes into the aircraft. We didn't want to modify the frame of the aircraft at all up until this point. So we had to have a way of pushing the retardant out. The way we push retardant out is under air pressure, and we have these high volume air compressors that run within the system. So in order to power those air compressors, we've put an electrical interface panel which draws power directly from the high-powered engine-driven generators directly to the air compressors to pump up air into the high-pressure tanks. Those compressors are huge. If you think of a scuba tank, they'll pump up a scuba tank pretty darn quickly. So they're working pretty hard, and they take quite a bit of power off the aircraft. So that's the only modification, is an electrical interface panel in the C-130s, and both C-130Hs and Js can fly the MAFFS system.
So in past years, up until very recently, as they were making a drop on fire, there was a recorded voice that came up as the aircraft got near the ground that said what?
Landing gear, landing gear.
And it wasn't just once or twice.
No, it's continuous. So
landing gear.
Climb up as you get out of the FTA.
Landing gear.
Got it.
Landing gear. Landing gear. Landing gear. Landing gear. Landing gear.
Start
Landing
right
gear.
here, okay?
Landing gear.
Ready. Ready.
Altitude.
Drop.
Landing gear.
So the aircraft, the H model aircraft is much less sophisticated than the J model aircraft. The J model aircraft is an all-electric aircraft. It has glass displays, has glass heads-up displays. It's very automated. In fact, the crew members, we've reduced the number of crew members on the J model down to just 2 pilots up front. We don't have a flight engineer or navigator, which they do on the J model, I mean the H model. The H model had a simple circuit breaker that they could simply say, stop talking, and you'd pull the breaker and it would stop saying landing gear. On the J model, that landing gear circuit went through a computer system, and the computer logic said that anytime you have your flaps greater than 70% and your landing gear's not down, tell the crew members that their landing gear's not down, and it didn't have any way of stopping it. So A few years ago, we went through the process of trying to make the modification of the aircraft to actually have it stop saying landing gear. Because on a drop, our landing gear is up, and where it flaps 100% as we go in for the drop, and it would just say landing gear, landing gear, landing gear, all the way through the drop and completion of the drop until you got the flaps above 70%. So we wanted to stop that because it was distracting and became a safety hazard because people were then used to hearing the words landing gear, and you could theoretically not put the landing gear down for landing, in theory. So we wanted to turn that off. The only way to turn it off was to change the software or do other modifications to the aircraft, and it came out that it was going to be quite an expensive venture to do that. And there wasn't a whole lot of interest from higher powers to make that modification happen because it's so expensive. So after about 3 years of hard work and budgeting, I was able to allocate, have the National Guard agree and allocate up to $5 million for modifying the aircraft, all of our J models. It still quite wasn't moving through the process, through the U.S. Air Force process, through the Lockheed process to get this thing actually modified to do. So came to mind, I thought, well, why don't I bring the engineers into the cockpit with me so they can hear it? And the only way to do that safely was to put a GoPro camera into the aircraft. So I sought permission to put a GoPro camera up in the center window of the C-130 and connect it to the intercom system so you can actually hear what the crew was saying, what they were hearing on the radios, and this annoying landing gear. So a few years ago, there was a fire just north of Santa Maria that we were called upon. That was the first test of this camera. And it, sure enough, recorded landing gear throughout the entire drop. I sent that video to Lockheed and to U.S. Air Force Air Mobility Command, AMC. Lockheed actually played it over their public address system. And I got the phone calls. You guys listen to that the entire time you're trying to do a drop? And I said, yeah, that's what I've been trying to tell you. So they, with everything else in place, with the money in place to do it and the resources in place to do it, they agreed, and so the modifications were to proceed. Right about that same time, there was a software modification that Lockheed had to do to their own software, and because they had to open up the software for their own modifications to it, we were able to insert a small snippet of code that they had already written for another C-130 owner. They could insert that code for significantly less dollars. A significantly less cost. I think it was around $165,000, and everybody was jumping for joy that they simply could do a simple software solution at such a significantly cost-reduced amount. Lockheed was happy, the U.S. Air Force was happy, and I'm most happy about having that thing not say landing gear the entire time as we're flying through. So now there's a modification that's only available on these 8 aircraft in the entire United States Air Force inventory. The software actually looks at the serial number of the aircraft in the database and says, if you're in this airplane, allow the landing gear warning to be turned off. So we have that ability to turn it off, and we use it only for aerial firefighting. And boy, it sure makes a big difference in flying the airplane and a lot less distractions. Since then, though, the video that I shot was picked up by several public affairs agencies, and they said, that's great stuff, we need to have more of that. So you saw, and even on your website, the rimfire video that I shot was an example of having that GoPro with the authorization up there. The modification hadn't been completed by the time the rimfire was there, but shortly thereafter it was modified that following year. And that video went all around the world. It was pretty amazing how impactful that the video was. And that fire was pretty amazing too. The rimfire, from my perspective, was just a very dramatic fire in my home backyard. I'm a California native. I'm a citizen airman. I fly Boeing 787s for American Airlines, and Yosemite is one of my favorite places to go. So when it was on fire, it was a pretty dramatic thing for me. So it was nice to be able to get the modification done, get the video out, get some good press for aerial firefighting in general, the MAFFS program specifically, and so it was neat. It's I've actually had there's several modifications to the aircraft that we've done. Not physical modifications, but we've had to add U.S. Forest Service radios, AFF type tracking, those kinds of things to be able to make us fit into the civilian world. One of the things that I've been trying to push over the years is that it's their house, their rules. It's the civil agency house, it's civil agency rules. So we change our military processes and procedures to match the civil procedures. We want to get into the flow just as if we're another commercial air tanker. So it's the same procedures. It makes it more safe, more efficient, more effective. And
Both this year and last year, all 8 MAFFS aircraft assembled in one place for this annual training.
Yes.
Is that trend going to continue?
I sure hope so. So it's a cost factor when it comes to that. So back in the old days, back in the legacy MAFFS system, we always came together 8 units, and it was quite an event. We had a tremendous amount of people, and the cost was significant, very significant. We had to come together because we didn't have onboard compressors. We had to use ground-based compressors, and we only had 4 to 5 compressors. So we would put all those compressors on one location, and then everybody would come to be able to put compressed air onto the legacy MAFFS system. Part of the design change for the MAFFS 2 system included these new onboard air compressors so we could compress in flight. What that allows us to do is be more agile. We can take the C-130 with the MAFFS 2 now and compress our own air and then go into air tanker bases around the country. Well, the thought was if we can do that, if we can do individualized air, just go into an air tanker base and get retardant and go to a fire, then why couldn't we train as a singular unit at home with our own compressors and be self-contained? So in 2009, we wrote what's called a concept of operations about how to deploy these new MAFFS 2 systems and C-130s. And part of that was the U.S. Forest Service wanted to see a cost savings in training. So they said, we came to agreement that about every 4th year, we would come together and do the training together. What we noticed was almost immediately out of the gate, standardization started to be modified. Some units were doing some things one way, some units were doing some things the other way. And when we were doing individual training, there was no cross-tell, there was no crosstalk between units to be able to standardize. In 2012, we had a tragic incident with MAFFS 7. And through the reviews, after we did some safety investigations and accident investigations, standardization became an issue. So we said, maybe these independent training activations are good, cost-effective, but they're not good for standardization, and maybe we should come together more often.
So we were in Boise, and yesterday most of the activity was in classrooms, and today they're flying. What exactly are they doing today? How many different missions will each crew undertake?
Well, that depends. So we do ground training at home, and we do quite a bit of mountain flying, performance, that kind of training at home, stationed before we ever come up. So last drill weekend, each of the MAFFS wings did training at home to minimize the amount of time we spend in ground training here. So when we come here, then we get the agency level type training, which is strategy and tactics, types of retardant applications, tanker base operations, pit operations, those kinds of things. So we're all on standardized. If there's any kind of changes in policies and procedures, it's all announced. So that's what you saw yesterday. Today is the go day. And for the next several days, we will execute all 8 aircraft, and they'll have about 4 periods or 5 periods of flying where crew members swap out typically every period or 2 to make sure that all the loadmasters get certified and recertified. The pilots get their recertification upgrade training or get certified. And we, like for this example this morning, MAFFS 6 took off with the basic crew to go out and get their recertification training. And so it takes 9 drops, of which 3 have to be wet. We have to do a heavyweight go around and an emergency drop. So the pilot this morning is actually an instructor pilot, MAFFS instructor pilot. He's going out with a newer aircraft commander candidate, but they're getting their currencies so then they can go into a upgrade mode to get him to become an aircraft commander. So the captain in the civilian fleet is what we call aircraft commander in the military fleet. The first officer or co-pilot in the civilian fleet is a co-pilot in the military. So the aircraft commander is a captain. So we take a very, very methodical approach to making sure that everybody gets enough proficiency training to be able to, right out of the gate, go out and fly on a fire. And then we have a upgrade program by which we very methodically take a co-pilot and bring him into the left seat as a captain or an aircraft commander. and then even more so to become an instructor. So today they're going to go out and do those 9 drops and get their currency. When they come back, then I'm going to take my co-pilot out. I'm going to get my currency drops. I'm going to get her currency drops. And then when I come back, I'll give the airplane to somebody else who's going to do the same thing. The 3rd period today, or 4th period today, I go out and I'm taking a aircraft commander, and I'm going to initiate his instructor upgrade training so that he can teach how to fly MAFFS. So now, these aviators are the best of the best in the C-130 world. The co-pilot has to be at least an aircraft commander, preferably an instructor pilot in the airframe that they're at. So we don't just take any pilots. We don't just take any loadmasters into this program. We wait until they are some of the best. They're qualified as being a captain or aircraft commander, and then we look to see about how they fly. Do they have the abilities? Do they have the airmanship? Do they have the wherewithal to do this mission safely? And then we bring them into, there's an actual board process. Then we bring them into the program as a co-pilot. We require them to be in the right seat for several seasons, certain number of drops, until we have an idea that we can give them the reins as the captain or the aircraft commander. And that's called an upgrade process. And then it's even more stringent to become an instructor pilot. So each of these sorties, we're doing those kinds of progresses. We're dropping water. We reload water here. We have 2 different tanker bases. We've set up a portable tanker base here at Gowan Field. We call it Gowan Tanker Base. And then I have required that all aircraft commanders must see a tanker base other than the portable tanker base, an actual tanker base during the refresher training, so they get an idea of how tight the taxi restrictions can be, all the different types of signals and things and the vests and so on that you would see, the hazards. So we're using the Boise tanker base for that purpose. It works out very well here at Gowan Field in Idaho, in that on one side of the airfield where the Idaho Air National Guard has allowed us to use their facilities for this portable tanker base. And then the Boise tanker base on the Forest Service tanker base on the north side of the runway is a real tanker base, which we've used years and years and years. Works out perfectly for us. There's 6 drop zones out near us that they have all NEPA certified. There's 2 drop zones that we have some sage grouse that don't want to be woken up before 9 a.m., so we can't drop until after 9 a.m. So there's 4 drop zones off to the northeast, and then 2 drop zones off to the southeast that we're going to use. And lead planes come from U.S. Forest Service, BLM, and CAL FIRE, actually. We've got a couple Broncos here, and we'll execute with all of our interagency partners, making sure that we've got everything's nice and smooth. In the National Guard units also have the ability to fly in state status. So California and CAL FIRE have been hand in hand for years now. And in fact, the last few years we've done state activations at the request of CAL FIRE and Cal OES, where we become tankers, Type 1 air tankers in the CAL FIRE fleet. And so that partnership has allowed us to be a lot more agile within the state of California, based on the governor's needs and the director of OES in California. And it's worked out really, really well for California. We're trying to make sure that Wyoming and Nevada have the same kinds of processes in place so that they can do the same kind of firefighting there if they need to. They go through the same kind of process, making sure the commercial air tankers are used first before they call us. But if push comes to shove, if they need us, we're here.
They're flying with lead planes today, right?
Yes.
So and those are operated and driven by Forest Service, by the Forest Service. Does that agency use the opportunity for training lead plane pilots?
Absolutely. In fact, the lead plane pilots actually come from Forest Service, BLM, Department of Interior, Bureau of Land Management, and CAL FIRE. So they use this as an opportunity to get their recurrent training and to become MAFFS certified. Just like there's specialized training for the VLATs, they also have specialized training for MAFFS. We do not do any initial attack with MAFFS. It's all behind lead planes, and so they use it as an opportunity to bring in their lead planes to get them proficiency in their upgrade training to be able to lead MAFFS. And it turns out to be not just the lead planes. There's a whole bunch of other civil agencies that are here. The MAFFS liaison officers, the agencies themselves are able to crosstalk and making sure that the aerial firefighting portable pits are set up, They draw from all sorts of forests, all sorts of GACs, and the state agencies, state forests, to come in and to kickstart the whole season, and it works out really, really well.
Will the lead planes or the air tankers today during the training be communicating with anyone on the ground in a simulated mode?
So there's no incident commanders on the ground. So there's no air operations branch director, there's no incident command. These are drop zones, basically have a latitude and longitude over the forest that are in an environment that are environmentally safe. So there's no ground to air communications from an IC, but the lead plane and all of the participating aircraft do all of the communications that they would normally do with air tanker bases, with Boise dispatch, with the lead planes, with an air attack, so that the simulation is real, and we have the automated flight following. The lead planes are taking over the incident. I'm not sure if we have any air attack aircraft here. I don't think so, but there are several of the leads that are ASM qualified, so they can actually perform both roles.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.